Spawning from a 1990 novel by acclaimed author William Steig, the ugly green ogre Shrek saw a pretty swift transition from book to screen. Spending a decade in production hell, the original DreamWorks film went through many hands, including Steven Spielberg and Jeffrey Katzenberg, and numerous iterations, including one which would have seen him voiced by the late Chris Farley. After a last-minute overhaul, Shrek went on to be one of the most influential animated films ever, and the character himself, under the lead of Mike Myers, one of the most beloved cartoon characters in history, forging one of the most successful and successfully memed animated franchises of all time. In 2022, Shrek celebrates 32 years, and to help him, I will trace his entire history from book to screen to superstar, across 4 films and dozens of spin-offs. Once upon a time, in this edition of Cartoon Evolution. Illustrator William Steig, dubbed the King of Cartoons, produced over 1,600 pieces for the New Yorker magazine between the 1930s and 1960s. However, in the later years of his life, he turned to writing and illustrating children's picture books. By 1990, he had published over 20 of them, many of which had gone on to be National Book Award finalists. However, at 83 years of age, Steig would release a book which would go on to define his legacy. Shrek. Shrek was a modern fairy tale, focusing not on a dashing, gallant hero, but on a repulsive, vicious monster with the ability to bellow fire, gobble lightning, and shoot heat rays from his eyes. The story saw Shrek, a teenage ogre, kicked out of home by his parents to fulfill his destiny of doing his share of damage on the world. Along the way, he's continually tickled by how everyone he comes in contact with is repulsed by him and his horrid stench. Shrek soon meets a witch who prophesies that he will meet a princess, and later comes across a friendly donkey who helps him on his quest. After battling a dragon and later a gallant knight, Shrek finds his princess, a being even uglier than he. Instantly falling in love, the two get hitched and live horribly ever after. Shrek doesn't really learn any life-altering lessons, nor does he come to find a love for humanity. Instead, he remains an ignorant and unsympathetic anti-hero, simply relishing in his ghastliness. However, in Shrek's aggressive desire to remain himself, and in his non-shallow love, Steig presented a character who encouraged readers to stay true to who they are and urged a love for others as they are. As hideous as it may appear on the outset, Shrek sported beautiful morals and lessons by way of flipping the traditional fairy tale on its head. Shrek, the book and the character, spat in the face of superficiality and embraced satisfaction and self-esteem. While Shrek was by no means a sensation, it was received incredibly well and quickly found its way into the hands of film producer John H. Williams, whose young children were fans of it. Williams saw something special in the story, saying, "I thought Shrek was outrageous, irreverent, iconoclastic, gross, and just a lot of fun," believing him to be a great movie character in search of a movie. Only 1 year after its publication, Williams brought the book to the attention of Steven Spielberg, who quickly bought the film rights. 2 years prior, Spielberg had formed Amblimation, a subsidiary of his production company Amblin Entertainment, focused solely on animation. At this point, Amblimation had a number of films in production, including a sequel to Don Bluth's An American Tail, alongside a couple of television series, most notably a cartoon adaptation of Back to the Future. Spielberg planned to develop Shrek as a traditionally animated feature and hoped to cast Bill Murray as Shrek and Steve Martin as the donkey. However, development didn't get far, with Spielberg's attention soon stolen by his newest joint venture. In October of 1994, Spielberg co-founded DreamWorks Film Studio with music executive David Geffen and film producer Jeff Jeffrey Katzenberg, only days after the latter had been let go from Disney, where he'd spent a decade as chairman of film production. Following an all-time critical and commercial slump, Katzenberg had been tasked with reviving the ailing Disney animation in 1984. Despite a controversial and ruthless leadership, Katzenberg's tenure was legendary, successfully jettisoning the studio into their Renaissance era with a run of acclaimed films, which helped turn the studio into the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate it is today. Following the death of Disney president Frank Wells, bubbling tensions between Katzenberg and CEO Michael Eisner came to a head, forcing Katzenberg to unceremoniously step down. Now taking control of animation at DreamWorks, Katzenberg immediately got to work on revolutionary new features. The division was not only made up of former Disney animators rallied over by Katzenberg, but the entire team from Spielberg's Amblimation, which was fully absorbed into the company. As such, staying on board as an uncredited executive producer, but stepping down from creative duties, Spielberg transferred production of Shrek to DreamWorks, with Katzenberg showing a keen interest in the project, finding it to have irreverence, humor, and a wonderful heart. Visual development got underway quickly, and early designs of the character show a much different Shrek than the one we would ultimately get. Some versions were categorically hideous and more in line with classic fantasy, while others were toned down and more appealing. Some designs even show a Shrek closer in style with Steig's original illustrations. However, animators settled on a gentler, more oafish design with slightly humanized touches, presenting a more lovable, relatable character. Of course, this sudden shift coincided with the casting of Shrek, with rising comedian Chris Farley landing the role. Farley had gotten his big break on Saturday Night Live in 1992, rapidly becoming an audience favorite thanks to his insanely loud, over-the-top, ostentatious, energetic, and exhilarating performance style. By the middle 90s, Farley soon saw success on the big screen, first supporting more experienced SNL castmates and soon headlining his own starring vehicles, such as Tommy Boy and Beverly Hills Ninja. Much like Shrek, Farley was a lovable giant with a huge personality and bucket loads of heart, who could be equal parts crass and kind. For lack of a better word, he was simply incomparable. Alongside Farley, two other SNL favourites were cast in supporting roles. Legendary 80s cast member Eddie Murphy, also one of the biggest and most lucrative film stars of the time, took the role of Shrek's lovable pal Donkey, while Janine Garofalo, one of Farley's co-stars on the series, was set as Princess Fiona. This version of Shrek was also vastly different, finding itself halfway between the original book and the movie we know and love. Much like the book, this Shrek saw the titular character booted out of home by his gruesome parents. However, not to fulfill his wretched destiny, but because he refuses to do so. While still repugnant and boorish, Shrek was to be given a heart of gold, wishing that instead of frightening people, he could help and be friends with them. In order to bulk up the slim 20-page narrative of the book, the character was to be taken on a grand journey of self-discovery, finding a trusty companion in a wisecracking donkey along the way. His biggest goal in life was to be a knight, and when presented with the chance to save a princess from a tower for an eccentric lord, he jumped at the opportunity. Production art and storyboards from the period also revealed that the witch, or now numerous witches, would have had prominent roles. Farley's portrayal has also been described as entirely different. Storyboard artist Tom Cito said that his wild energy in the recording booth was exhausting but really funny, noting that he was constantly flushed, bouncing off the walls, sweating heavily, and looking like he was about to burst out of his clothes. We all joked about how we hoped he wouldn't just fall over in front of us. Screenwriter Terry Rossio said that the recording sessions were essentially everyone in the booth rolling off our chairs onto the floor, laughing our asses off. though in contrast, in true Farley style, his Shrek is said, from numerous accounts, to have been sincere, heartfelt, vulnerable, touching, heroic, courageous, fantastic, and extraordinary. His brother Kevin said, originally the Shrek character was a little bit more like Chris, like a humble, bumbling, innocent guy. While Rossio added, what struck me most was his willingness to reveal himself, lay himself out bare over and again, even calling his performance key to the creation of the character. While none of Farley's performance has been officially released, one small storyboard sequence has found its way online, showcasing the more vulnerable side of his performance.
Ah, boy, has he underestimated you.
Yeah, he can join the club. People see me and they go, "Ah! Help! A big, stupid, stinky, smelly, ugly ogre!" And they judge me before they even know me. My folks always told me that everyone loves ogres.
I see.
I guess they were a little overprotective.
A little?
That's why I gotta do this. I want them to know I can take care of myself.
You want to make him proud.
Yeah.
The cast reportedly recorded all, or almost all, of their dialogue for this embryonic version, which was then set to be produced in a hybrid animation form, utilising motion capture animation for the characters and live-action miniature models for the backgrounds, since DreamWorks saw CG animation as rather sterile, simple, and too challenging for an entire feature with many limitations. The production team, headed by directors Andrew Adamson and Callie Asbury, even produced test footage in the hybrid medium, some of which has only recently emerged after being some of the most sought after lost media. The footage sees a primitive animated Shrek dancing through a live model environment before coming head to head with a hostile mugger who he sends flying into oblivion. After 18 months of development, filmmakers put together an animatic version of the film in mid-1997, comprising the storyboards and CG tests. The reel was screened to executives and was an absolute disaster. Katzenberg said that it looked terrible, it didn't work, it wasn't funny, and we didn't like it. Production designer Guillaume Eretos pinpointed the biggest problem as being the story was too dark, and driving the look of the film too dark as well, saying that it could have been an obscure cult movie if it had been done like that. Jeffrey didn't want that. He wanted a story that would be original and at the same time pop. Producer Aaron Warner elaborated, saying further problems came from their interpretation of Shrek himself, noting, at that point it just didn't feel like he was a character we wanted to tell a story about. Katzenberg immediately shut down production, insisting on a complete rework. Warner further noted that we had to try and figure out another story and how we could best preserve the work that had already been done. As part of the shake-up, Asbury left the project as co-director and moved to the studio's then more prestigious film, Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron. Soon, Shrek's head of story, Vicky Jensen, was put in his place. The team laboured over ways to redraft Shrek, which in the words of Jensen consisted of trying to find a new tone that we could work with. It was soon decided that the film needed to be more focused on comedy than adventure. However, just as headway was being made, the project was hit with yet another massive hurdle, the death of Chris Farley. A notorious party boy who'd been regularly quoted as saying, "I want to live fast and die young," met his untimely demise on December 18, 1997, after overdosing on a hazardous drug cocktail. The loss of the 33-year-old actor meant that even more of the film had to be overhauled than previously thought. Jensen said the story had been geared around him, so when he went, the story kind of went with him. With the studio wanting to hire someone that could lead a potential franchise, keeping the Farley dialogue and hiring an impersonator to finish it up was off the table, though was briefly contemplated. The search for a new Shrek now took top priority. Considered for the role was emerging icon Leonardo DiCaprio, fresh off Titanic and Romeo and Juliet. However, it wasn't to be. More seasoned performer Nicolas Cage, right at the pinnacle of his career, was, however, approached. Fearing the impact being depicted as an ogre would have on how children viewed him, Cage turned the role down. Eventually, eyes turned once more to Saturday Night Live, specifically Farley's co-star and friend Mike Myers. In the middle 90s, following an incredibly successful successful 7-year stint on SNL, Myers was riding a wave of popularity, rocketed to superstardom through successful big screen outings such as cult favourite So I Married an Axe Murderer, SNL spin-off Wayne's World 1 and 2, and global sensation Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, a succession of films which truly spotlit his incredible comedic prowess and performance range. With Shrek's new angle geared towards character-driven comedy, Myers was a perfect fit. With a large desire to work with Katzenberg and a love for the book, Myers accepted the role. He was, however, adamant that the movie be entirely reworked from scratch again. As it had been tailor-made to fit Farley, Myers didn't want to be seen as stepping into his shoes, not only out of respect for his late friend, but in an attempt to make the film feel more like a Mike Myers vehicle and not a Chris Farley one. Adamson later said, "We spent almost a year banging our heads against the wall until Mike Myers was able to come on board. Chris's Shrek and Mike's Shrek are really two completely different characters, as much as Chris and Mike are two completely different people." Filmmakers toiled again, soon landing on an idea that would change it entirely. They needed to return to the book's concept of fractured fairy tales, as Katzenberg put it, and as Adamson recalled, it was now a matter of deconstructing traditional fairy tales and reconstructing a new one. Warner added, "Once we had worked out our opening scene with Shrek in his outhouse, we had a clear idea of how to approach the comedy and what we were trying to say. We were all brought up listening to fairy tales, but not many on our team could really relate to them. That's the reason you suddenly had this idea of, oh, that's who Shrek is. He's reading a fairy tale, he thinks it's crap, we love it." With Shrek, it was the comedy that drove the whole thing. This development really had a kind of ripple effect throughout everything. Shrek's world would now be filled with fairy tale characters, and he'd be sent on a crusade to remove them from his swamp after the ruthless Lord Farquaad exiles them there. In a way, the movie now appeared to be a major jab at Katzenberg's ex-employer, and while DreamWorks and filmmakers have continually dismissed the notion, it's very clear to see that the movie is an enormous parody of Disney's classic fairy tale cartoons, and it's obvious that Katzenberg, still harboring resentment for being so disgracefully dismissed, went out of his way to make that point. From the parody-filled fairy tale characters, to the Disneyland-inspired Kingdom of Duloc, to the clear Michael Eisner caricature that was Farquaad, to the aforementioned opening sequence, which literally opens the movie with Shrek wiping his butt with a Disney storyboard, the kind of which had opened their fairy tale features since Snow White in 1937. In effect, the team finally realized that to crack the code, all they had to do was flip Disney's stale and waning fairy tale formula on its head. As a result of Myers' casting, Shrek, currently designed after Farley, had to be visually revamped again too. Also in line with the new tone, Shrek was redesigned to look even less grotesque and more comical, while retaining the oafish, humanized nature. Some have speculated that the final design was inspired by Maurice Tillet, a professional French wrestler from the 1930s to 1950s who had a rare hormonal disorder. Tillet, best known as the French Angel, was frequently called the freak ogre of the ring, and a consummate showman regularly played up to the name. No one involved in Shrek has ever confirmed an official connection, though the similarities simply cannot be coincidental. Another issue also now had to be addressed: Princess Fiona. The character was still to be a major focus of the film, with Shrek and Donkey sent to fetch her for Farquaad or meet their death. The story team realized that the new solitary, somewhat more pessimistic version of Shrek was no longer compatible with the grotesque princess. Shrek needed someone more positive, radiant, and beautiful. The idea of an enchantment was devised, seeing Fiona predominantly taking the form of a gorgeous human princess, yet turned into an ogre every night, a curse that could only be revoked by true love's kiss. Now, when the characters are set to fall in love, they learn lessons about loving oneself and embracing differences. At film's end, Fiona would choose to remain an ogre, taking love's true form, to live harmoniously with her true love. All in all, looping back to the book's original themes, but presented in a more poetic way. As a result of this change, DreamWorks recast Fiona with Cameron Diaz, Hollywood's It starlet of the time, having seen recent success in The Mask and There's Something About Mary, with the iconic Charlie's Angels on the way. While no official reason was given for Garofalo's replacement, some have suggested her original performance may have been too sarcastic, with Garofalo even saying, "I was never told why. I assume because I sound like a man sometimes." The cast soon began recording new dialogue, while animators got to work crafting the movie, which was now being produced entirely with CG animation. Following the success of Disney and Pixar's 1995 pioneering effort, Toy Story, DreamWorks dove headfirst into the medium. The studio struck a partnership with computer animation studio Pacific Data Images in 1996 and began work on what would be their very first release, 1998's Ants. Impressed with PDI's groundbreaking technological work on the film, they also enlisted their help for Shrek, where they would continue to develop new technologies that had never before been seen. Katzenberg noted, "I thought the animation technique should be as different as the story and the sensibility of the movie. In other words, visually, it needed to be different. We wanted to take this fairy tale world, bring it to life, and have it feel very realistic without it being photorealistic, a stylized realism." After recording their dialogue over the best part of 3 years, another test screening was held. Upon seeing it, Myers, who had voiced Shrek in his native Canadian accent, wasn't happy with the final result. Again, very little footage of this version has been released, though that which has been gives us an idea of Myers' initial rendition of the character.
This is my swamp.
Our swamp.
Let go, donkey.
You let go.
Stubborn jackass.
Smelly ogre.
Fine. I'm no one's messenger boy, okay? I'm a delivery boy. You coming, donkey?
Oh, yep, I'm right behind you.
Myers implored DreamWorks to allow him to re-record his entire dialogue track with a new voice, later saying, "Everybody was happy with how it turned out, but I knew I could give it more." In an effort to make Shrek appear more working class, Myers decided he wanted Shrek to have a Scottish accent, saying, "Scottish people are fantastic at being super happy and then getting super mad. That's an ogre." This voice, inspired by the Scottish fathers of his childhood friends, was actually a regular part of his shtick, using it regularly on SNL and even directly parodying those Scottish fathers in Axe Murderer. He'd even use it once again in the then in production Austin Powers sequel, The Spy Who Shagged Me, for now classic character Fat Bastard. Katzenberg approved a test recording and upon hearing it instantly signed off on a re-record, despite the fact it would incur a budget increase to redo much of Shrek's character animation. He said, "It was so good we took $4 million worth of animation out and did it again," while Myers, who offered to do the re-record for no further charge, said, "Everyone agreed that I had found Shrek." It was this decision that ultimately turned Shrek into the iconic character that he is today, belligerent and self-assured, yet intelligent and compassionate. It's often recognised as being one of the major decisions that saved the film. Katzenberg noted, "It really is impossible to give Mike Myers too much credit for the contributions he has made. He had an extraordinary impact on the movie." While Spielberg, still quietly involved, personally contacted Myers thanking him for taking the time and caring about the character, crediting him with dramatically improving the movie. As a favour, Spielberg also made a brief cameo in the third Austin Powers flick, 2002's Goldmember. Shrek premiered at Cannes Film Festival in April of 2001 as the first animated film since Disney's Peter Pan in 1953 to compete with the prestigious Palme d'Or. Generally, it released in late May and was an instant smash. Children loved it for its bright and entertaining characters and hilarious one-liners and visual gags, while adults appreciated its broad, cheeky, often quite crass and mature humour. The movie's pop culture references and lauded modern pop soundtrack also made it a breath of fresh air. Film critic Roger Ebert called Shrek jolly and wicked, filled with sly in-jokes and yet somehow possessing a heart. In its entire box office run, Shrek pulled in almost $500 million globally on a budget of only $60 million, and went on to be the fourth highest grossing film of the year worldwide, behind Disney and Pixar's Monsters Inc., Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Alien, and Lord of the Rings: The Fellowship of the Ring. Domestically, it came in second, beating out Monsters Inc. by 1 spot and Disney Animation's Atlantis: The Lost Empire by 24. Becoming an instant quotable classic almost overnight, the movie even broke home video records upon release 6 months later, becoming the fastest and biggest selling DVD of all time at the time. Selling 7 million copies across DVD and VHS in the first 3 days of release, it would eventually sell 21 million copies in its original print run. Included in the home media release was what can be considered the first piece of extended Shrek media, Shrek in the Swamp Karaoke Dance Party, a 3-minute short film acting as an extension of the film's final scene, featuring the characters singing more catchy pop tunes. The short is so well known and beloved to the first generation of kids that grew up with the movie on VHS, on which the short auto-played directly after the movie, that many often confuse it as being part of the movie itself. At the 74th Academy Awards in 2002, Shrek walked away with the first ever Oscar for Best Animated Feature, once again beating out Monsters Inc. and solidifying DreamWorks as a powerhouse in animation and a worthy competitor to Disney. Shrek's supreme success made it one of the most influential animated films of the 2000s, changing the face of animation and making way for a more risque, pop culture-infused style which continues today. This success even led to DreamWorks' split from PDI, forming their own independent studio, DreamWorks Animation, headed by Katzenberg in 2004. In the interim, however, a sequel was already on the way, with preliminary production having begun in 2001 before the first movie was even completed. Katzenberg intuitively knew that Shrek would be successful and envisioned it as a story in 4 parts, wanting to give audiences answers to so many questions left open in the first as soon as possible. Of course, Myers, Murphy, and Diaz returned to their lead roles. While filmmakers seemingly had all the time in the world to craft the original Shrek, Shrek 2 had to be much more streamlined, though despite such restrictions, they remained aware they couldn't rush it. Katzenberg further cited the biggest single challenge of Shrek 2 as being trying to meet people's expectations, while newly anointed co-director Conrad Vernon said another was to make sure they could surprise audiences again by sticking with the heart, soul, intent, and sincerity of the original without falling into the sequel trap of bigger is better. Filmmakers wanted the film to hinge on the nature of happily ever after and explore what really happens next. It was decided that the film would introduce the in-laws, and after briefly considering a story which would see Shrek's parents visiting the swamp, it was realized that it wasn't Fiona who had to meet the parents, but Shrek. Looping back to the core ideas of the first, Shrek 2 would see Shrek coming face to face with unaccepting in-laws and a public more judgmental than the inhabitants of the swamp. Andrew Adamson, returning as co-director alongside Vernon and a returning Asbury, has been credited with devising this idea, inspired by the groundbreaking 1967 Sidney Poitier film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, about a black man meeting his white girlfriend's parents. The film would also bring Prince Charming into the fold, as his mother, the evil fairy godmother, schemes a plot to fulfill his destiny of marrying Fiona. Feeling shamed, shunned, and helpless throughout it all, Shrek is put in a position where he has to face his own personal insecurities over again, once more making him his own biggest enemy. In order to win over Fiona's parents and the general public of the Kingdom of Far Far Away, and to win back Fiona from the dastardly Charming, Shrek takes a potion that turns him into a dashing prince, giving us our first look at him in human form. Donkey, getting in on the action, transforms himself into a gorgeous white stallion. Myers noted that he loved being given a chance to explore Shrek's character even further, and again helped filmmakers redefine him creatively at a moment where they felt like they were starting to lose the character. Finally, with revelation after revelation, the film winds up back where it started, with Shrek and Fiona rekindling their true love, and the general populace coming to accept them for who they are. Additionally, the movie continued to break new ground in animation, with new technologies devised to help make characters, like the newly introduced Puss in Boots, voiced by Antonio Banderas, possible. Puss is introduced as a hitman sent to kill Shrek, but soon turns loyal companion, instantly becoming a fan favourite and a regular of the franchise. Concurrently, another Shrek production was additionally in the works, Shrek 4D, a 12-minute short film devised for a new motion simulator attraction to open at Universal Studios Hollywood and Orlando in 2003. Immediately following the first Shrek, the short saw Shrek and Fiona, along with Donkey, heading off on their honeymoon. Along the way, they are accosted by the ghost of Lord Farquaad, find themselves in the middle of an airborne dragon battle, and end up plummeting down a 1,000-foot waterfall. The attraction presented the short in 3D and featured motion seats with pneumatic air propulsion and water spray nodules, allowing for a fully synced sensory experience. While the short was created for a theme park attraction, it was handled by Shrek 2's production team, who made sure there were no narrative conflicts in order to retain a concise continuity and proper narrative link between the two movies. Producer David Lippman said, "We had to keep things clean and not step on anything that was happening in Shrek 2. The following year, the short was released on DVD as Shrek 3D The Story Continues, so all viewers could see it before the release of the sequel. Almost a decade before 3D became a major staple of blockbuster releases and the inception of 3D-capable home media, Shrek 3D was presented in Anaglyph 3D, with the DVD set bundled with pairs of red and blue tinted paper glasses. More recently, the short has been reissued in 2D as part of various short film packages on home media, under the new title, The Ghost of Lord Farquaad. Shrek 2 opened in mid-2004, performing even better than the original, taking in just shy of $1 billion at the global box office on a $150 million budget. Likewise, it competed for the Palme d'Or at Cannes, as only the 6th animated film in history to do so, since only one more, 2007's Persepolis, has gone for the prize. Today, many fans consider Shrek 2 the best in the entire franchise. Hitting home media in late 2004, the film was also presented alongside a brand new Shrek short, Far, Far Away Idol, a parody of American Idol featuring the Shrek characters and a cameo appearance of then Idol judge Simon Cowell. Naturally, the gigantic success of Shrek 2 resulted in a further 3 Shrek installments being greenlit by DreamWorks, who now wanted to tell the story in 5 parts. Following a couple of delays, Shrek the Third hit theaters in mid-2007. The film sees Shrek and Fiona preparing to take the throne of King and Queen of Far, Far Away, as Fiona's father, King Harold, reaches his deathbed. However, Shrek has another crisis. Fearing an ogre should not be king, he sets out on a whirlwind adventure with his pals Donkey and Puss to find Arthur, the only other heir to the throne, and bring him to the kingdom. Madness ensues when they come to realize Arthur, or Artie, is an inexperienced and underachieving 16-year-old. Meanwhile, a pregnant Fiona remains in the kingdom, while Prince Charming teams up with a band of villains to take over the land and steal the throne. A huge finale sees Charming defeated and Artie taking the crown as king, while Shrek, Fiona, and their new children retreat to the swamp to start their family life. The movie continued the exploration of Shrek's insecurities, but didn't manage to hit the same depth or soul as its predecessors. While still pulling in over $800 million at the global box office, it received a lukewarm critical and audience reception, with many bemoaning an overload of pop culture references at the expense of classic Shrek heart, charm, and wit. The movie was also criticized for its oddly balanced humor, with a mix of franchise-low, puerile, watered-down jokes and incredibly adult gags. David Anson of Newsweek remarked that it's a movie at war with itself, a kiddie movie that doesn't really want to be one. A new short Shrek installment was released in late 2007 on television. Shrek the Halls was a 22-minute holiday special set immediately after Shrek the Third, charting Shrek's very first Christmas on the swamp. Of course, in true style, it's a Christmas full of family, fights, and disaster, but ultimately one with redemption and togetherness. Airing on ABC, it ranked #1 in its time slot on its original airing, and later received a standalone and bundle home media release alongside Shrek the Third. While Shrek 4 was a few years off, Shrek the Musical opened on Broadway in December of 2008. The musical retold the movie, but as a Broadway musical, featuring almost 30 new songs. Expanding the movie's story and characters, the musical also featured new moments and flashback scenes. The production received a mixed reception, but managed to walk away with a Tony Award for Best Costume Design and a further 7 nominations, including Best Musical, Best Book, Best Original Score, and Best Actor and Actress nods. While it only ran for 12 months on Broadway, it went on to tour the US, then saw a successful 2-year run on London's West End. It later toured the UK and Ireland, Brazil, and Australia. In 2013, a pro-shot recording of the original Broadway production was released on home media. The fourth Shrek movie, intended to be the franchise's penultimate entry, was initially in production under the title Shrek Goes 4, though according to co-writer Josh Klausner, about a year into development, Katzenberg decided that the story was the right way for Shrek's journey to end, falling back on his original plan for a story of 4 parts. The title was then changed to Shrek Forever After, though was heavily marketed as Shrek the Final Chapter. In the movie, Shrek faces one last internal challenge, a midlife crisis that results in him accidentally wishing his life away to the evil Rumpelstiltskin. Shrek is transported to an alternate reality where he was never born, and Rumpelstiltskin rules the kingdom, in a narrative clearly inspired by Frank Capra's 1946 film It's a Wonderful Life. Shrek, to prevent himself from being erased forever, must win over the affections of a still cursed Fiona, now leading an ogre resistance army, and join her in overthrowing the new king. Of course, after some missteps and gigantic battle sequences, Shrek and Fiona fall in love again, and are transported back to their original timeline to live there happily ever after once and for all. Shrek Forever After opened in April of 2010 and was again an enormous financial hit, though making slightly less than the previous, with just over $750 million on a budget close to $160 million. While the movie once again received a relatively lukewarm reception, it was almost universally believed to be far superior to Shrek 3. The movie was the first and only feature-length Shrek installment originally released in 3D, and DreamWorks Animation's third overall, following a huge push from Katzenberg to capitalize on the format, believing it to be the greatest advance in the film industry since the arrival of colour in the 1930s. As became a standard during Hollywood's huge 3D boom, the first 3 Shrek movies were all given 3D conversions, which were released as part of a 3D Blu-ray collection in late 2010 to coincide with the home media release of Shrek 4. This release again sported a brand new short film, Donkey's Caroling Christmas-tacular, a 5-minute tale which sees Donkey leading a medley of fairy tale Christmas carols. The short was included as a bonus DVD branded Donkey's Christmas Shrektacular, which featured a program of Christmas-themed interactive features including Shrek's Yule Log, a 30-minute virtual fireplace featuring all of the classic Shrek characters. Additionally, in 2010, Shrek and Company appeared in yet another 22-minute holiday special, this time aired on NBC. Scared Shrekless was a Halloween special featuring 3 short parodies of classic horror movies: The Bride of Gingy, a Bride of Frankenstein parody starring Gingy; Boots Motel, a Psycho parody starring Puss in Boots and Donkey; and The Shrekxorcist, an Exorcist parody starring Shrek and Pinocchio. The special also featured new bookends and linking sequences, with the characters sitting around a fire telling each other these scary stories. The special hit home media the following year, accompanied by Thriller Night, a new 6-minute short parody of Michael Jackson's Thriller music video, featuring the Shrek crew and a gang of zombified franchise villains. Scared Shrekless was released again in 2012's Shrek's Thrilling Tales home media compilation, which bundled the film up with a selection of other shorts, including The Pig Who Cried Wolf, a 6-minute short starring the 3 Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf, which had been released as a Nintendo 3DS video exclusive a few months earlier. The contents of Shrek's thrilling tales were later reissued with various other shorts as the DreamWorks Spooky Stories collection. Though another Shrek movie wasn't on the way, 2011 did see the release of the franchise's first spin-off movie, one which was alluded to in the final frames of Forever After. Puss in Boots naturally told the origins of Shrek's kitty companion years before they met, charting his adventures alongside newly introduced sidekick Kitty Softpaws, voiced by Selma Hayek. Co-writer David H. Steinberg noted that the movie was made as a prequel so that there was no overlap with Shrek, as creators didn't know what Shrek 4 was going to do with the characters, and they wanted to avoid writing conflicting storylines. In production since Shrek 2, the movie was initially prepped as a direct-to-video feature before DreamWorks realized the character and his enormous potential for storytelling deserved more. The movie opened in late 2011, took in an above-average $555 million globally, and received a largely positive reception, with critics lauding it for being an old-fashioned adventure free from the saccharine gags and overloaded pop culture references of the later Shreks. Naturally, a 13-minute short, Puss in Boots: The Three Diablos, accompanied the film on its home media release in 2012, seeing Puss out to retrieve a stolen ruby while accompanied by three troublesome young kittens. This was further followed by The Adventures of Puss in Boots between 2015 and 2018, a 6-season, 77-episode series produced by DreamWorks Animation Television for Netflix. The series, a prequel to the prequel movie, charted the even further adventures of Puss as he protects the once hidden city of San Lorenzo from invaders, alongside a new roster of supports. While Shrek didn't appear in the series, another ogre of similar appearance, named Tranche, appeared in numerous episodes. In 2017, DreamWorks additionally produced a spin-off special, Puss in Book: Trapped in an Epic Tale, Netflix's very first interactive special. In 2014, a few years after the release of Shrek's final chapter, Katzenberg mentioned that he was confident another chapter in the Shrek series was on the way, noting, "We're not finished, and more importantly, neither is he," once again going against his 4 parts plan. In 2016, following DreamWorks Animation's acquisition by NBC Universal, reports surfaced that a screenplay had been completed for a 5th movie, which had a planned 2019 release. However, nothing seemed to come of it. In 2018, it was reported that Universal had tasked Illumination head Chris Meledandri to reboot the Shrek franchise at DreamWorks, now no longer run by Katzenberg. According to Variety, Meledandri was tasked with finding fresh storylines to reintroduce the characters to new generations of moviegoers, with Meledandri noting, "The challenge for us has been to find something that really does feel like it's not simply yet another film in a series of sequels. Though the next Shrek is planned to be a franchise reinvention, it's been said creatives want the original cast to return. No other information or further confirmations have since followed." In fact, the only appearance of Shrek on our screens since 2011 has been this bizarre live-action, sort of, cameo appearance alongside Mike Myers in an episode of his 2021 Netflix series, The Pentaveret. Though we're currently in the dark on Shrek 5, Meledandri's first revival in the Shrek universe has landed, with 2022's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish hitting theaters. Not so much the hard reset previously believed, and more so a soft reboot. Last Wish takes Puss and Kitty Softpaws on their next adventure, where, finding he's on the last of his 9 lives, they seek the mystical last wish to restore them all. Set after Shrek 4, Last Wish features appearances by various Shrek characters, as well as an exciting new pre-film studio ident and a mid-credit stinger, which signifies a potential revamped Shrek universe of movies may be closer than we think. Regardless of his absence from the screen, Shrek's franchise is still hanging on, and his presence still looms large over the animated landscape, with his influence still clearly touching so many animated features 20 plus years on. He's also managed to penetrate the social and pop culture zeitgeist in ways so few characters have done, in the form of hilariously viral memes, demonstrating his enduring relevancy and proving that he's more beloved now than ever before. It's almost certain we'll see Shrek again. Hopefully we won't be waiting forever and ever. For now, to be continued. And at that, I want to know, what is your favourite Shrek appearance, film, quote, or meme? And are you excited for a potential 5th film? Join the conversation down in the comments below.